Hello and welcome to Oh So Retro, and to this is a 1993 Acerpower 450DP. Now, I haven't been able to find an awful lot about this PC online, at least not this specific model, but it is a pretty standard Acer desktop from that sort of time period. In fact, many of you would probably recognize the look of this particular PC. This particular PC case was used for many years. In fact, I've seen 286s, PCs as early as a 286, which had a variation of this case. And indeed, anyone who was around in the 90s and was at school or in libraries or in any sort of institution like that would probably recognize this as a fairly standard desktop PC from the early 1990s. I'm very fortunate in that this one is almost entirely complete. It has its original Acer View 33D SVGA monitor. This is a 13-inch monitor. It's SVGA obviously. And then it also still has its original Acer keyboard, which is extremely cool. The speakers are of the right vintage, but they're not the original speakers. Well, they aren't Acer speakers, but they are the speakers that actually have been with this computer ever since the beginning. And the mouse is not, unfortunately, a original Acer mouse, but it is a Logitech 3-button, which is of also around about the same vintage. You can see that this computer is fantastically yellow from the sun, which is always a good sign. In fact, some parts are more yellow than others, which is interesting. That speaker on the right hand side is incredibly, it's aged more, shall we say, with the sun than the one on the left hand side, but that's probably just to do with where it was positioned inside the house. When I originally got this computer, it was equipped with this, which is a 8-speed CD-ROM, and so I was very excited when I saw this, because it meant that it probably had a sound card in it as well. And sure enough, when I looked, there was a sound card in the back, which was obviously very exciting, because it means it's probably something like a Sound Blaster 16 or a Sound Blaster 32. And indeed, we'll see exactly what's inside it when we open it up a little bit later. But this is basically a 486 DX2-66. It's the Acerpower model. I'm not entirely sure what Acerpower means. There was an Acermate, which was, I presume, the more standard version, the more sort of office-orientated version. This is the Acerpower version. As far as I can tell, the only difference is that this has got 16 megabytes of RAM, whereas the Acermate had 8 megabytes of RAM. So it's not exactly a powerhouse, but I'm sure by the standards of the time it was more than adequate for what people were expecting of it. So yeah, we're just going to open it up in a bit, and we're going to have a look at the hardware that's inside, and we can see exactly what sound card we've ended up with. And yeah, unfortunately, as I was saying earlier, this 8-speed CD-ROM drive that it came with isn't working for some reason. I'm not entirely sure what the problem with it is. I've opened it up a lot, and I've overhauled it as best I can, and I've looked at it and seen if I can find anything that's obviously wrong with it, but there doesn't seem to be anything obviously wrong with it. So what I've done is I've replaced it with this 4-speed CD-ROM drive, which is probably actually more period for this PC, because, as I said, this is a 93 PC, it's an early PC. I suspect that this that the CD-ROM drive and the sound card was probably added later. I'm pretty sure that this is not a standard thing that this PC would have had from the factory, but again, I can't actually find much information about this exact model. I can find other models that are very similar, but this exact 450DP, I'm not sure. So if anyone knows, then let me know. below in the comments. But yeah, so let's open it up and have a look at what we got inside. Okay, so here we are now. I've removed the screen, I've unplugged all the keyboard and the mouse and all that sort of thing. So now we can have a look at the case and all the hardware inside. What's quite interesting about these Acer cases from this period in time is that it's actually a case that you can open without any tools. You know, as far as I remember from all the computers that I worked on back in the day, you always needed a screwdriver to even open the thing. It needed 4 screws at least before you could even take off the top cover. But these Acer cases are actually quite cool because they are completely modular, as it were, and you can remove pretty much everything on this computer without so much as a screwdriver. The only place you need a screwdriver is if you actually want to take out the expansion cards, but I'll just show you how easy it is actually to open this case. What you can do is you're just underneath the front panel, there are these small little clips that you can just push, and then this whole thing's removed. There aren't any wires or anything, and you can move that away. And then now this is where it does sometimes get a bit tricky, because this particular computer came from the coast and it's a bit rusted on some of the rails in there, but I have ordered a bit, so hopefully it's going to play ball. So in order to open here, what you do is you just push down these little buttons on the side here. Not buttons, just like a little indentation, as it were. And then this case ought to slide back. There we go. Let's just try to get this other side in as well. There we go. And then this whole thing just lifts off, and there you go. It's as easy as that. It's very simple to open up. There's no hassle, there's no tools, nothing. It's all just great. Okay, so I've moved in a bit closer here. Now what I'm going to do now is just remove the sound card. I'm sure the observant amongst you would have already recognized which sound card this is, but I'm just going to take it out. This is the only time that you actually, as I said, you need a screwdriver, is when you need to remove the expansion cards, but everything else you can actually remove without any tools. You can actually pull this whole mechanism that holds the CD-ROM drive and the floppy drive and everything right out. This whole power supply and hard drive thing all removes. It's without tools. It's quite fiddly to get it right, actually. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing to take apart without accidentally breaking something, but it is actually, you know, it is nice from the point of view that you can do it without tools. Alright, so let's get this sound card out. Be careful here. There we go, I'm going to remove this IDE cable.
Right, sorry everybody, that's me from the future here. I decided to do this particular part in voiceover again because some of the things that I had said here were not entirely accurate. So the sound card that I got on this computer in the end was this one. It is a Sound Blaster 32. Specifically it's the model CT3600. This was a value-oriented version of the AU32. It lacked some features of the AU32 such as onboard RAM and the Wave Blaster header, but it did have the same MIDI capabilities as the AU32, and crucially it was still fully compatible with the AU32 and used the same drivers. Now this one is quite nice because it actually has got RAM that has already been populated onto the card, so that helps with your wavetable, I believe, and makes it sound a little bit better. And even though I initially thought that this was exactly the same card that I had as a kid, it's not quite. I did in fact have the original Sound Blaster AU32, and unfortunately I recycled that about 15 years ago or so, which was a really dumb thing to do, but needless to say, I was still very happy to see this card in this computer. And if I look online now and see how much these are going for, it's about twice the price that I paid for this whole machine. So I was really happy to see this card in this computer because it really was a very good buy from my point of view.
Alright, so now we can have a look at the board now that the Sound Blaster card is out of the way. And they are fairly interesting boards, these actually. It's obviously made specifically for this particular computer. It's not really something that, I mean, I suppose you could put it in some other like machine, you know, but it's not really made for that. You can see it's made specifically for this. It's got onboard VGA here, and this is the actual onboard chip. It's an ATI Mach 32. So it's all on board. It's all built in. It seems to be reasonably fast. Actually, it's not bad, that chip. I'm not entirely sure how much RAM it uses. It uses, I think, the onboard system memory, either that or it's using this as its video RAM. I'm not too sure. If you know, then by all means let me know in the comments below. And then here's the processor we've got. Let's see if we can take this heatsink off. Yeah, so there you go. It's an Intel 486 DX2-66. As you'd expect, more or less a standard Intel 486 DX2. There were also AMD versions of these chips, which were apparently slightly faster actually, but yeah, the Intel one was maybe a bit more compatible depending on the program. There's a whole bunch of other videos on YouTube you can look up about that if you're interested. And then here we have the system RAM, of course. This machine has got 16 megabytes, so there's 4 of these, so I presume each one is 4 megabytes. And then this is a little riser card here where you can plug expansions, where you can plug your expansion cards into, because obviously there's no space anywhere else because of all this stuff. This is a very, this PC is very compact. It's got everything crammed into a very small space, so which is awesome for, if you want a small PC on your desk, but it's not so great for when you want to work on this thing, because to get access under here, I had to change the CMOS battery when I first picked this machine up, and it was a real mission just to even access that CMOS battery. So yeah, it's a very interesting design. It's not necessarily the one that I would want to work on every day, but it is quite good. Okay, so obviously one of the reasons why I wanted to open this computer up was so that you could see what was inside it, obviously, and then we could have a look at all the interesting things inside the computer. But also, one of my reasons was to put in this network card, because anyone who's used optical drive or a stiffy disk pretty much ever knows just how unreliable these things can be. I mean, just as a way of an example, this is a brand new box of stiffy disks that I bought online recently. And it was unopened and they hadn't ever been used before, and even so, about 4 out of the 10 in here just aren't working. I mean, like out the box, and that's probably just because of their age. So I don't really want to have to handle these stiffy disks anymore. They really are just the bane of my existence at this point. I've got a huge pile of them behind me here, where I've tried all of them and they just don't work because they're so old. And even optical drives are not actually that fantastic. I mean, even though this one is working, and it seems to be working fine, it still can't actually read about half of the CDs which I've tried in it. And that might be just because they were written on a newer writer, stuff I downloaded off the internet which I wanted to put on this machine. I wrote it to a CD and it didn't work. So, I mean, I don't really want to deal with these either. I mean, in certain instances they're fine, especially with original CDs, they seem to be perfectly fine. But if you want to move anything from one of your modern PCs onto a retro PC like this, then you really need a much better option than either an optical drive or stiffy drive. You can get emulators that instead of these stiffy drives. At the moment they're a bit expensive here in South Africa. I can't really import them either because of all the stuff that's going on in the world at the moment with the virus, so I don't want to go that route. They're quite pricey to import. You can get SD cards to IDE converters as well, which are quite cool. I have one on my other PC, but this machine has a nice old school mechanical hard drive that's still working. So the easiest way around all of this is just to put in a network card, because then I can try to get networking going under MS-DOS, and that'll make transferring files onto this PC much easier. Now, there's a fantastic video about this on PhilsComputerLab on YouTube. He has all the steps there that which you need to do in order to get networking working under MS-DOS, and all the files. He explains it fantastically. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with that, because I'll just link his video in the description below. But it seems to work quite well. I'm using the same network card as he had. I think it's basically the same network card. It's a Realtek 8139D. and the reason I'm using this network card is because you can still get drivers for it for MS-DOS. So I'm just basically going to do exactly what he did in his YouTube video and see if we can get networking working in MS-DOS. Okay, so we're back now, the computer's been put back together. Now, I'm not sure if it's recognized the actual network card itself, but I'm just going to now see if I can install it and just see what it says. And I've got that video I mentioned from PhilsComputerLab here that explains exactly how to do it. And I'm just going to, see if I can make it work. So, yeah, let's go for it. And there we go, the FTP server is now working and we're busy copying across all the things that we need to do the benchmarking. So yeah, if you want to see how to do this again, then the link to that video from PhilsComputerLab is in the description below, so just have a look at that. It's fairly straightforward if you just follow along with his steps, but and it's much easier to do this in the long run than it is to try and use stiffy disks or even CDs to transfer files across. So this is highly recommended, this method. It's much easier. Alright, so there we are. Now everything is has been copied across, so I can go ahead and exit here. There we go. Now I should be able to go to this directory, and there it is. And never actually run this before, but let's try DOS Bench. We'll try and get some. Oh dear, that's not good. Alright, so I haven't been able to fix that particular batch file. I'm not too sure why, so I'm just going to run it manually for now. It's probably the easiest way to do it. I'll see if I can fix that problem, otherwise, I mean, this is, ooh, the pack file is corrupt. That's not good. What is going on today? Let's try a PhilsComputerLab benchmark. Let's just go for normal benching. Alright, so there you go. It seems to be running it quite well. Not too bad. It's not overly or obviously slow. Okay. Alright, so we got 26.8 frames per second. Alright, so that's something. It's not terrible, I suppose. Let's maybe try the landmark speed test. Or the landmark 60, whatever. See how it does here. Okay, so you can see there it says it's 486DX. Well, it's 486DX, it's running at 66.7 odd megahertz. It says it performs like a 316 megahertz AT with a 485 megahertz 802287. Interesting. Okay. That is quite interesting actually. That says there that the video is Trident, whereas it was ATI when we looked at it. So I'm not sure if that's correct, or maybe it's just reading it wrong. But that is pretty interesting. This info. Okay, so it says that the built-in BIOS is from July 1991. Interesting. Okay. Display is VGA. Yep, we knew that. Let's go and do some benchmarks. CPU speed. So it's got a computing index of 96.6. So it's slightly. It's sort of a slow 486 DX2. This actually, I think, because it's not say that far ahead of the 486 DX33. So it's not exactly a very fast machine, this, although it was never really meant to be. As I said, this was a very mainstream computer. It wasn't really meant for hardcore gaming or anything. It was more of an office kind of machine, you know, schools, office, library, that sort of thing. Top bench, benchmarking, real-time benchmarking. Alright, so most closely matches the following entry in the database of P90 Plato or an IBM EduQuest. Yeah, so here it's saying that it's actually around about the same speed as a SX2 megahertz, which is interesting. Alright, let's run Doom. Oh wow, no, it's not running that well at all, is it? There's more bad command file name. I don't know what's going on here. There's something weird. But anyway, let's go down. Okay, we got 234 game ticks and 3,714 real ticks. Alright, let's run 3D Bench 2 here. I think this one might work. Whereas the other one wasn't working for some reason, so let's just try this. Looks good. Yeah, there we go. It's running it quite nicely actually. So it says the system has a superscape benchmark of 36.3 frames per second. So that's something. That's all right. We can also run maybe PCP benchmark. That's also quite a nice one. Let's do that. Just see how that goes. Oh, okay, it's complaining because it wants, it's expecting me to have a VISO graphics card and I don't, so I'm going to just run it with VGA mode. Hopefully, there we go, it's running it. Not so well, but it is running it. Okay, so it gets a player bench of 8.8 frames per second. Yeah, so you could more or less see that just by looking at it, that it wasn't running fantastically, so that is what it is. Alright, we're just going to run Quake now as well, even though it won't really run on a 486-66, in fact it would struggle on a 486-100 even, but we're just going to run it just for, you know, why not? And that's pretty much what you would expect from Quake running on a 486 DX2. Pretty miserable.
Two hours later.
And there we are, 6.3 frames per second. So yeah, that's completely expected to be that low.
And here we have the results of the benchmarks in a handy bar graph. I've taken a bunch of other machines off a spreadsheet on PhilsComputerLab because these benchmarks are off PhilsComputerLab. So I've chosen machines that also are 486 DX2-66 and just sort of chosen them randomly. So you can see in 3D Bench 2, for example, it's a fairly average performance. It is slightly better than the i486 DX2 here in green. It must be mentioned that that 486 DX2 in green does not have any cache, any onboard cache, so that might be what's hurting its performance. But the Acerpower in this case is quite far behind the AMD 486 DX2-66 and the Cyrix 486 DX2-66 in purple and orange respectively. It must also be mentioned here that the AMD and the Cyrix, I think, both have discrete graphics cards, which I think accounts for this increase in performance that we're seeing over the other two machines in this comparison, which both have onboard built-in graphics. With PCP Bench, again, a very average performance, slightly better than the Intel 486 without any cache, but lagging quite far behind the AMD and Cyrix. In Doom, 20.1 frames per second, which is about the same as the Intel 486 DX2 without any cache, but it's quite far behind the AMD and the Cyrix, especially the AMD. That extra 6 frames per second makes quite a big difference, I'm sure, in terms of playability. The real ticks value here is the amount of time that the computer took to run the Doom benchmark. In this case, lower is better, so we see the Acerpower's got 37.14, more or less the same as the other Intel 486 with no cache, but it's significantly higher than the AMD and the Cyrix, and that's just because the AMD and the Cyrix were running at higher frames per second, so therefore it completed the benchmark in a shorter amount of time. In terms of Quake, we can see that Quake is definitely CPU bound in this case. The minimum requirement for Quake was always a Pentium processor. Even a 486 for 100 or 133 for that matter can't really run Quake at any kind of a decent performance, and we see that in the case of the 486 DX2-66 here, that it's completely unplayable, but is included here just for interest's sake. So that was the Acerpower 450DP. It's a really great little MS-DOS machine. It looks the part. I just love this aesthetic. I love its tiny little 13-inch monitor and that Sound Blaster 32 card, CD-ROM driver, really nice additions. And it's just a great PC for early to mid-90s MS-DOS gaming. Sure, it's not the fastest 486 DX2 out there. It does struggle a little bit with Doom, and it would struggle with any other game using a Doom engine, so things like Rise of the Triad or Heretic or Hexen or whatever. I do actually have a 486 DX4-100 processor lying around, which I can put into this machine and just see what kind of a difference that makes, and then I can also maybe install Windows 3.1 on it. If you'd like to see either of those two things, then let me know in the comments below. But yeah, my final verdict basically is that it's just a really great little MS-DOS machine for especially things like point-and-click adventure games, early 90s driving games, maybe things like Stunts, IndyCar, that kind of stuff. And it's especially good for things like Sierra games and for earlier first-person shooters like Wolfenstein 3D, for example. So yeah, I'm just really happy with it, and I plan to do a lot more content on this computer in the future, maybe some reviewing some old MS-DOS games, for example, some unboxing MS-DOS games, that kind of thing. So if you liked this video, I know it was a bit long, but if you liked it, then by all means leave a like. And if you'd like to see more of this sort of content, then hit that subscribe button. And that's going to be it for this video, I'm afraid. So I'll leave you to play out with the awesome sounds of Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. Cheers, guys.
knows how you're gonna find that statue and all this junk. These books don't look familiar. Uh-oh. Better get that roof checked. An invitation of Bast, cat goddess of fertility. An invitation of Bast, cat goddess of fertility. I'll be. Here's what I've been searching for. Strange looking thing. I wonder where Marcus picked it up. I'm back. Indy?
You don't look at all well, Dr. Jones.
Exploring our collections can be dangerous, Mr. What was your name again?
Smith. Tell me, did you find a lock to match my key?
You bet I did. Take a look.
What are you waiting for? Let's open it.
Why not? It's an obvious fake.
You may think so, Doctor, but I believe we are opening a new chapter in history.
My word, Indy, a small metal bead. Jewelry, perhaps? I still think it's a fake.
Then you won't mind if I take it.
Really, Mr. Smith?
Stand back, gentlemen.
I hope you've got a getaway car waiting. You'll need one.
Wo ist Fritz?
He got away. But we got his coat, Marcus. Hey, what's this? Klaus Kerner, huh?
Good Lord, Indy, the man's some sort of agent from the Third Reich. What does the spy want with the Buddhist statue?
I lied, Marcus. I don't think it's a phony. I can't place the style, but it's old.
Look what else our friend was carrying. An old copy of National Archaeology. And there you are in Iceland.
Yeah, field supervisor for the Jastro expedition. My first real job.
Who's the woman?
Sophia Hapgood. She was my assistant, a spoiled rich kid from Boston, rebelling against her family.
Where is she now?
She gave up archaeology to become a psychic.
How odd.
You can say that again.
Indy, Kerner found you. What if he finds her? We should warn the woman.
You're right. I want to know more about that statue. You know, Marcus, the coldest year of my life was the one I spent in Iceland with Sophia.